Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen.
With me today is abundance teacher and money coach, Jody Lynn Craven.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And Jody Lynn, unfortunately, our guest doesn't seem to have made it today. We've had a pattern of that lately. We'll have to do something about that pattern. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Yeah.
But it does give us an opportunity to do something we like doing, which is just doing a show ourselves and talking about some stuff. And we actually do have something to talk about this week because as listeners, longtime listeners who've been paying close attention will know I have a new project I've been working on where I'm working with some Filipinos to create a new service to help people raise their positivity levels through direct interaction, kind of like what we do here on the podcast. And so I've been running training sessions for my first crew this week. And you showed up to help out with yesterday's training session, which I really appreciate, by the way. I appreciate that a whole lot.
You're welcome. It was so much fun.
It was fun. Yeah. It was also kind of funny because one of the reasons that I picked Filipinos to do this is they are very even-tempered people. They aren't cowed very easily. They're sad to say, if they're abused, they won't come back at you screaming and yelling. They'll usually just smile and move on, which can be good and not so good depending on how you look at that. But they took that to like the nth level because we couldn't get them to say anything while you were there talking to them. After you left, I mean, you were there for like a half an hour. You gave a great presentation about some really good ideas about how to be a good one-on-one person working with people in a coaching type environment. But after you left, then they started to open up. It's like up until and you and I were kind of chatting and joking about it before the show. Like you're so intimidating, right?
So intimidating.
Which is the last word I would associate with you. But
I know. It's really funny the perception that people have of other people, because like me, we've been friends now and doing the show for a couple of years, and so that I'm not intimidating at all.
I knew, but I've gotten that. That's why I don't get it, because I could tell from the moment that I first interviewed you a couple years ago, there's nothing intimidating about you. There's a lot that's intriguing about you, a lot to admire, but intimidating?
Yeah, it's kind of a shocker, but I get that a lot.
How do you get that a lot? How is that possible?
You know what? I think it's really interesting. I think there's like two parts of this. I would watch my dad. So my dad is a farmer dude, cowboy, like boots, coveralls, like blue collar man. And I would watch my entire life as people would expect one thing with him, and then he would begin talking and they would be like, oh my word, like that's not what I expected from this man. Like he's very philosophical and he's very like deep and very intriguing. And I would always watch people like go from like this one point on the left side, I'm just picking left arbitrarily, but like on the left side of like, oh, this just dumb redneck or whatever, right? They never said it out loud, but like you could just see it. And then like they'd be like this transition of watching him and being like, oh, that's not what I expected. And then I've watched this in my own life because I look really young and I've always looked really young. And I got like a baby face. I got the cheeks and stuff, and I'm only 5'1". I've always been small. So I have gotten the same thing where people are like, oh, dumb blonde or just young, doesn't know anything. And then all of a sudden they give me an opportunity to talk. And it catches people off guard. So they don't know how to handle it, because what they perceived when they first saw me and now what's coming out of my mouth, they're just having trouble reconciling the two. And sometimes that comes out as intimidation because I really know my stuff, I guess.
Well, I suppose that shows how important perspective is, which you mentioned. because my perspective when I run into somebody who has that big of a difference between my initial impression and what comes out is, whoa, this is great. I love it.
Yeah.
It never would have occurred to me to be intimidated by that.
No. Yeah. Well, I think maybe you come from the place of curiosity, and that's where we connect really is I'm a
True.
very curious person. Like I want to know more because I really didn't get you when I first saw you. And that's, I don't know if this is rare for you, but it's rare for me, Walt, to not, have an understanding of someone before they even say too much. I usually get this sense or impression or whatever of the individual. And it's rare that I'm not spot on with a situation when I'm paying attention.
But you missed with me when we first met?
No, but I think that when people when we miss that, when somebody catches us off guard, both of us have the same reaction of, ooh, tell me more. Like I'm excited, I'm intrigued. But I think when people are caught off guard with their perception and it is wrong, like so wrong, that's not what they expected at all. Sometimes that comes out as like, oh my, I'm wrong, or it's this intimidation factor of, they didn't know, or maybe they know more than me, or like this fear that comes up, which is, I don't know, really weird.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with that word fear, because that really is what's at the root of it. And that's at the root of a lot of perspectives. I mean,
yeah,
if there are some 7 billion people, 8 billion people, whatever it is on the face of the planet, that means there are that many perspectives at least, and those are just the human ones.
That's right.
there's a bunch of us, a bunch of different perspectives out there, and the vast majority, I think, are probably fear dominated. So
absolutely.
So from that point of view, I guess it's not surprising.
Yeah, and it's usually like, oh, I thought, like we always compare ourselves to other people. So I think that intimidation comes back to like comparison and the fear of not measuring up. Like, oh, when I look at you, like when somebody's looking at me and they're like pound for pound, okay, I think I'm her equal. And then if they were thinking that I might not be that intelligent, or like they just made these misconceptions about she's really young, what does she know, whatever. And then I speak and I say something intelligent and they're caught off guard. They're like, oh, shoot, I don't think I am, which is not, I mean, just because you say something intelligent, like I told your group last night, like to always remember that we put our pants on the same way,
right?
Like one leg at a time, because it doesn't matter the knowledge that I have versus the knowledge that you have. This isn't a competition between the two of us or any of us in this world. It's about what we bring to the table that is unique and different and special, which each one of us has to bring.
And fun too. I think that's the curiosity factor that you were talking about earlier, because I agree with you. We both have that curiosity factor. And for me, curiosity is fun. It's a fun thing to, whoa, I'm going to get something new here. I'm encountering something I haven't seen before. This is great. I love it.
Yeah. And I think too, for me, and I'm sure this is true for you, the aspect of learning, like when I don't know something, that doesn't mean that I'm dumb. It means that it's an opportunity for me to learn something new, which excites me. I love to learn. I love to understand, whether it's about people or a specific topic or whatever. But a lot of people in our society take that as a negative. I don't know enough. And I think that's silly. In my financial career, that's what made me different, or that's what has made me different, is the things that I didn't know, but I was willing to go and find out. Like I would never lie to my clients like, oh, I'm only a year into this, I know everything. No, I don't know everything, but I'm going to do everything I can to learn for your unique situation, whatever is going to benefit you the most.
Sure. Yeah. And that's what anybody wants from any kind of advisor.
Right.
In fact, I'll tell you one of my pet peeves. One of my big pet peeves where mainstream medicine is concerned is that when a doctor doesn't know something, they won't admit that they don't know it. Instead, they'll say, well, there's no evidence to support.
You know what? That's such horse crap.
It is.
I also hate, it drives me nuts, and it's probably my perspective of like my hunger to learn and my curiosity. But I was thinking about this the other day. I hate that they don't try and educate you. You know, when you go in, and they do tests or whatever, and they're like, oh, your blah 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 is blah blah blah, and you're like, okay, what does that mean? Yeah, you just need these pills, or you just need this, like, or there is no explanation. I've run into that a lot with the fertility racket. I've been on this fertility journey for several years, and like, I asked my last doctor, so like, what is it, like, my tube doesn't work? Yeah, it doesn't work. Why? Well, I don't know. Like,
well, that's a good thing. I'm glad he said, I don't know. That's actually refreshing.
They were just like, no, she didn't say, I don't know. She was like, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And there's nothing that we can do. Yeah. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, how about educate me and tell me about the processes? Like, what is even in there? How do these things work? Like, I had no idea the gut relationship, or the relationship between your gut biome and your hormones, and the hormones do certain things. And if you have too much of this or too much of that, or not enough or whatever, those like finger-like things in the fallopian tube don't work that well. Like, in my brain, it makes sense to check on some of these things if somebody is having a history of those things not functioning the way that they're quote unquote supposed to. But no, they're like, no, we should just cut that out and just do IVF. Like,
it's really kind of ironic is the gentle way of putting it.
Yeah.
They're blaming a tube. It's the tube's fault.
Yeah, it's the tube's fault.
Really?
But we can't, there's no tests.
That's kind of like you're drinking a soda, which I don't do anymore, but you're drinking a soda through a straw, and there's a hole in the straw, so some of the liquid starts spurting out as you're sucking in the liquid through the straw, and you blame the straw. It's not the straw's fault that it had a hole in it. Why are we blaming an inanimate object? That's crazy. It's like, the straw got together with other straws and says, we're going to pull one over on Walt today. No.
Yeah.
Why are we blaming the tube? I don't understand why we blame the tube. It doesn't make any sense.
Doesn't make sense to me either. But they don't like it when you ask a lot of questions. I even found this. I'm seeing I'm going to a holistic fertility clinic, and I just know this about myself. I'm just so curious. I just want to know all the things, especially when it comes to getting to know me. I say this all the time, that I just want to get to know myself better. So that also includes the physicality that I'm inhabiting in this moment. So I go to the acupuncturist, and she's like, oh, let me check out your tongue. And so she checks out my tongue, and she's like, okay. And she walks away, and I was like, what? Can you tell me about the
Is that good, bad, indifferent? What is it?
Yeah, like, she's like, oh, there's like a little patch that doesn't have this covering on it. Oh, okay. What does that mean? She's like, I'm not quite sure yet, but we're gonna do a couple of things here and whatever. And I was like, okay, great. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wonderful. But like, what are you looking at? And like, she took my pulse the very first time. And they do it like with their actual fingers rather than the machine. Right. And she's like doing it on the one side, and she's doing it on the other. And she's like, do you have asthma? No, I don't have asthma. Do you feel like you're getting a cold coming on? And I'm like, maybe. I just sneezed yesterday and snotted all over my dog. And she's like, oh, okay. And she like moves on. I'm like, why? Like, why are you asking me these questions? She's like, oh, because of your pulse. I'm like, what about my pulse? Well, when somebody is sick or the body is trying to like flush something out, your pulse sits a lot higher. Like, you can feel it a lot more readily to the top of the skin versus it's not as deep. You don't have to really listen for it, I guess. And I'm like, I had no idea. And I think that's when I asked, like, is that because the system is trying to flush something out? And she's like, yes, that's exactly why it's happening. Wow. I'm like, okay, great. This is amazing. I want to learn. Yeah. I don't want you to just sit here and poke me and tell me what to do. I want you to explain how these things work, because I think that we have this unique ability our bodies have a unique ability to heal, and we have a unique ability to know what our bodies need. But if the doctor is speaking in one language, or any professional is speaking in any sort of language that you don't really understand the whole picture, then I think you're going to miss the cues that your body is giving you, or I have missed the cues my body is giving me. Okay, well, this is happening, so this is related to this, or whatever, right? Like, let's
I
just
love that.
educate ourselves.
Well, I love the fact that your doctor was displaying the thing that you and I were valuing a moment ago. The doctor
Mhm.
was curious. She was trying to figure out, what's going on here. I'm getting an interesting thing here. I wonder why I'm getting that. Let's explore that
Mhm.
further. As
Mhm.
opposed to the way most mainstream doctors work is they check your vitals and see if they're normal compared to, meaning average compared to the rest of the population. And if they are, you're fine.
Yeah, you're good. No, but it wasn't like, I mean, you were talking about that before. I wasn't that way before. So why
Right.
am I different? Oh, age. Oh, come on.
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't think so.
I mean,
Like,
that
there's
answer pisses me off
no.
on two different levels. One, first of all, she is not paying any attention to the fact that I have massive longevity in my family, so age doesn't really add up the same way. And B, it's a throwaway answer. She didn't know. She had no idea what was actually causing this situation with me. So she said, "Well, we'll just blame it on age because that's what the average person experiences." In other
Right.
words, we're all average in the eyes of modern medicine.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know
Okay.
about you, Jody Lynn. I don't think I've ever met the average human being.
No, they don't exist.
No.
They don't exist. We're all different.
So why must we treat everybody as average? I mean, I do know why they do it. It's because that's the way science is structured within mainstream medicine. To me, that's an indicator they need to restructure.
Yeah.
They need
To
to
me,
think
it's
this
an
through.
indication that the system is broken and corrupt.
Mhm.
Just saying.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Well, we won't go too far down that path. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's a side that we don't want to spend a whole lot of time on. It's not good for us to be focusing on all the time. That's the
That's right.
technical term, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
There is, however, the question of what can be learned from it. I love, for instance, that the doctor you had just referenced, the holistic doctor, was curious.
Mhm.
It's something that modern medicine has kind of lost track of. Modern medicine supposedly is based on science, right?
Mhm.
Science is all about curiosity.
Mhm.
You don't really have science without curiosity. I mean, the scientific method, the very basis of how science is done, is you gather some data and you formulate a theory. And then you gather some more data to check your theory. And then you adjust your theory. And then you gather some more data. It's a curiosity venture. It's like,
Mhm.
let's find out some more stuff. Let's gather some more information. Let's see what we can figure out here.
Without attachment.
Yes.
Imagine how different our lives individually and then collectively would be if we started playing our lives more like that. This
Mm,
is just simply information. Now, if we're confused or we're upset or whatever, we got to let go of the emotion of it
mhm.
and gather some more information. That's really about it. Get
Yeah.
curious about what's going on. But you think about the things that would change if instead of getting so invested and so attached emotionally through all of the things that are going on outside of ourselves as well as within ourselves, and we just started to take a step back and really look at it like, okay, this is data and I can interpret it a couple of different ways, possibly billions of different perspectives on that one piece of data.
This is
Right?
true. Now, there's also an irony. There are a lot of ironies, but there's one particular irony I'm thinking of with what you just said, because what you said I thought was spot on. But the irony that's built in is, like you said, they're like there's a resistance that gets built up. You're
Yeah.
talking about the beauty of we just accept the data for what it is. It's data, and we don't get worked up about, oh, the data isn't this particular way. But here's the odd part. Here's the irony part. People who get upset about the data are wanting it to change, but
Mhm.
they stay on the fact that it hasn't changed, and that keeps their perspective from changing. So
Yeah.
they block themselves from the exact thing they want. That's pretty ironic.
It is ironic. And if you start thinking about it as data rather than like, I want it to be this data, what can you learn? What could you see? What could you interpret that could be completely different? And like one of my deepest core values is that everything happens for a reason and it's always for the better.
Mhm.
So I will step back from the shit pile that's on fire at the moment and be like, okay, maybe it's not that. Like, I know I wanted it to be this over here, you know, flowery and beautiful and smells great, but maybe it's because of that perception of what I think it should be. Maybe that's what's causing the stink. Like, let's get rid of that. Let's be more open to what could this be instead? What could I learn from this instead? Like, what beautiful thing could come out of this instead? I actually said this to my best friend this morning when we were having our coffee together. I said, I look back at every hard turn in my life, every bad, quote unquote, thing that has happened. And obviously at the moment, it didn't feel good. But looking back, I'm so grateful. That's exactly what needed to happen. It was such a blessing in my life.
Yeah.
So whatever's coming next, whatever that's gonna be, it's going to be the biggest blessing I've ever known.
I love that. That's really good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, that's really what it's all about.
Mhm.
I'm also reminded of something too from what you said there, because we referenced earlier that you dropped by last night to help out with training for my new project. My Filipino trainees who are learning how to be positivity partners. And one of the things that I'm teaching them is I'm giving them a series of games you can do, you know, positivity games, things to shift your mindset. One of the ones that I gave them I gave them last night, was a game that comes right out of the Abraham Hicks genre. The book Asking It Is Given has 22 processes at the back, and it's one of those processes. It's the one called the Creative Workshop. And it's so simple because the Creative Workshop is really nothing more than this. Identify something that you want, and then identify why you want it. So literally, it's just a way of focusing your attention on the positive in the affirmative sense of not the negative sense. Not like it's not, I don't want this to happen. It's not that kind of thing. It's, I want that to happen. I want that. I want that because that's going to enable me to have this great experience or something along that line. How interesting that idea of the creative process aligns perfectly with what you were just saying. Because if you follow that creative process, you end up getting the data you were looking for. You end up getting the information you were looking for. And so the flow happens, right? We talk about flow a lot. That's where that flow starts to really happen. When you don't ask that question, when you don't play the creative workshop game, that's when you cut off the flow. So the one thing that you could really do more than anything else is to focus on what you want rather than what you don't want. And yet, what do we end up doing? Well, we end up talking about how we have this, how my life is always a hot mess, the part that we don't want. You know, but this experience that I had with this other person was just so terrible because that person was just stuck on this one thing. In other words, once again, and I was doing this earlier, I was doing it about modern medicine, you know, focusing on what we don't want. All we have to do is remember to use the creative workshop and say, well, what do I want expressed in positive terms? And what result do I think that's going to produce that's going to be beneficial to me?
You know what? That's interesting. I 100% agree with that. And the story, that's the story of my life, really. But like talking about fertility, for me, I got to a point where the last fertility clinic that I went to, they ran me through a test, and the results that they found were that I have a heart-shaped uterus. And so they like packed everything up and we're like, we have to do a 3D, imaging, whatever. So we have to redo this test because you have a heart-shaped uterus. And when you have a heart-shaped uterus, millimeters matter. And I was like, cool. And I didn't think about it until after I left, but I have a long drive home, an hour and 20 minutes from that location.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right. So I'm thinking about it and I'm processing. And that's something about me is I like time to process. How am I feeling? What's going on? And the question that came up in my mind was like, how do you not know that already? How do you not know that I have how do you not know I already have a heart-shaped uterus when I knew in 2020 because of a test they did. And then in 2023, when I went back to the other doctor who had referred me to the fertility clinic, I had a whole big conversation about, is this an issue? And that doctor had said no. So it leads me to a conclusion of one of two things. You either read my chart and didn't care and wanted to do the test because it was going to give you money. Or the other one is that you didn't read my chart. And maybe there is other possibilities outside of this. But those are the two biggest possibilities that I had come up with in that moment. And I was like, I'm not okay with that. And I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do this. This is dumb. I'm treated like a number. Nobody is really taking care of me. It was all of these negative things. Like, I feel so taken advantage of, overlooked, like, just like there's no help. There's nothing that we can do. And I was sitting in that for a while. And then I just said to myself, well, and my husband, I kind of made the decision and then checked in with him if he was okay with that. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to go through the stupid tests that hurt and that are going to tell me nothing that I don't already know. I'm fine. I am fine. That tube is fine. Everything is in good working order. I just have that feeling, not that they will acknowledge it, but they're not going down the road that I want. They're not even giving me the care that I want. I don't want to do it anymore. And then I followed up with my husband and said, I don't want to do these tests anymore. Are you cool with that? My reasoning is that they're just going to make me do it in a year from now if we decide we want to go down the IVF route, that all of these tests will be stale dated, quote unquote. So I'll have to redo all of them again. So I don't see a point in doing this. I just want to not do these anymore. And he was like, yeah, cool. That sounds good to me. I'm on board. Like, I get you. And then I started to focus on what I do want. I want to take my health into my own hands. I want to understand about these processes. I want more information. I want somebody that cares about the whole system and can teach me more. And you know what? I let it go. Completely let it go. Was like, whatever. I don't know. I might start, doing ovulation tests. I might, this, that. I just was in this period of waiting. It was like, okay, whatever, it'll come to me. And then I was literally on the phone with one of my financial clients. I'm their advisor, and we were just chit-chatting, and she just had a home birth. And of course, I'm curious. So I was asking her a bunch of questions. And then she told me about this holistic fertility center, which is like right on my back door. Like, it's very close to where I live, like within 45 minutes, everything is relative.
Yeah, no more 80-minute trips. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, perfect. And I didn't realize it until this instant that if that experience wouldn't have happened, I wouldn't have made that decision. So it doesn't matter why that experience happened, like how it ended up, the steps to it, but that experience allowed me to say, no, I don't want this anymore. I want this. If this is meant to be, I'm going to lean into full faith and trust of God and the universe and everything else. And I'm just going to go where I am led to go. And I did exactly that. And I feel like I'm starting to actually learn. And I'm on Chinese medicine now. I'm doing acupuncture. I'm doing some of these other things that I think will make a big, big difference. But I don't think I would have gotten there as fast if I wouldn't have said no. Because that was just like a couple months ago, March, February, March. So it wasn't that long ago.
No, it's not that long ago. It also occurs to me that you did something brilliant, which is not surprising. You often do. But in this particular case, the brilliant thing that you did was you didn't stop when you said, no, I don't want that. That's where most people stop.
That's right.
They just stop with, no, I don't want that. If they even get there at all. They may people please and not even allow themselves to do that. But if they allow themselves to do that, they don't go to the next step, which is, here's what I want instead.
Yeah. Well, for me, this whole time, the last doctor that I saw last year said, when I had the ectopic last year, she said, there's something wrong with your tube. We need to take it out. And I only have the one left. And that really felt final to me. So that was crushing.
Oh, yeah.
And then for me, I have not been ready to do that. I don't want to do that. Like, that feels like then there's no going back. It just does not feel like the right path. And I felt like everything going down that like doctor road was leading me towards that, making that decision. And I knew that for me, in my heart of hearts right now in this moment, that that's not the decision that I'm making. Like, I would rather live on my feet than die on my knees. I would rather give it one more shot and like, all right, like I've been through this a couple of times now, 3 times to be exact. Like I know that it's dangerous and whatever, but I'm very precautious. But it doesn't scare me if that was to happen again. I know what the signs and symptoms are. I would know how to get the help that I need without like losing my life, essentially. Like I am aware of my body more than most. And I had a big conversation with Nate and I was like, I want to try again. And I mean, worst case scenario, it goes awfully and they have to cut it out. But at least I did it while trying. Like I'm actually trying to do something. So we'd already made that decision. I just had kind of kept going with the process the wrong direction. So I needed to be recorrected.
And once again, I'm reminded of what I said earlier. They're blaming the tube. The doctor who wanted to remove the second tube was blaming the tube as if it was the tube's fault.
Right.
I kind of, this is a common thing that Western medicine does, not just with tubes, but with all kinds of stuff. They cut things out. That's part of what Western medicine does. And they do it so blithely. I wonder how many opportunities they miss to find out something better, because that becomes their fallback. Well, if we don't know what to do with it, we'll cut it out. And I wonder how many situations they create by cutting it out. I mean, we already do know medicine does know there are certain things that when you cut it out, it has adverse effects. Doesn't necessarily mean that they won't recommend it anyway, but the adverse effects happen because the stuff that's in your body is there for a reason. I mean, it has its role to play. So
right. And it's all connected. It's all connected to one another. So what am I doing by saying yes to just cutting it out? What's fascinating though, and I remember this quote of necessity is the mother of all invention.
Mm-hmm.
And in talking with my aunt 30 some years ago, it was 35 or 36 years ago, she was having fertility issues and they found that all of her tubes had holes in them. And so they literally took the one tube out, used it to like make a patchwork quilt on the other one to patch it up and fix it. And then she had successfully had my cousin. Okay. And I think that that's extraordinary that 35 years ago, they did that because it was needed. There was necessity there. But now it's easier to just say, let's cut it out and let's just go through the IVF route. And that was my experience. But also I had declared to the universe that I wanted to believe that I could heal this, that I wanted to believe that our body is magical and like that it has the power to heal things. There's been a lot driving me in that direction, growing our own food. I've started to learn about, herbalism and just growing different things. Like I'm even treating my dog right now because she's got arthritis in her hip and she's sore. And like I think it's making a difference. I think that our energy makes a difference, that we're communicating with all the inanimate and animate objects around us, all of these things. So for me to really tap into believing all of that, at some point I had to choose to stand with that. I think that this was that choice.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. I've mentioned on numerous occasions here on the show that I'm not somebody who likes to watch a lot of television, and it's true. But lately, I've also had a little more opportunity to do so just because of the way my schedule goes. So I've tried a lot of things out, a lot of different, the popular channels and so forth. I really don't like most of it. I'm finding more and more that, I was right to stay away from it. But I keep looking because I want to find some stuff to fill in some of the gaps particularly when I'm eating dinner or something like that. To watch. So my most recent attempt was to sign up for the Gaia channel. I hadn't done that one before.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the first things I encountered was a series by Dr. Joe Dispenza called Rewind. And so I've been watching that, and it's a lot like going to his workshops, I gather, just from the way, he he makes the presentation on the show very much like he's standing at a workshop. It's almost like he's on a stage in a workshop arena, except there's no audience. And I'm pretty sure he's doing pretty much the same kinds of talks that he does in his workshops and in his week-long retreats and so forth. But anyway, there's about I think there's 2 seasons worth of episodes, and each season has something like a dozen episodes in it. I'm about halfway through right now, and they're really fascinating. I mean, talk about what you were saying. You want to know more. You want to understand more. That's one of the things I'm getting from this. I'm loving the more that I'm getting from it.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking a moment ago was that he was describing specific patterns, just specific processes that go on in the human body when it comes to healing. And in particular, he identified a couple of cases from people who had attended his week-long retreats, his workshops, where there had been some pretty miraculous healings that had gone on. One of them, he described the woman who had attended the workshop. She was 72 years old, and she had Parkinson's disease. And my ears perked up because my dad perished from symptoms related to Parkinson's disease. So, that one caught my attention. And he described how this woman, when she arrived at the retreat, had the tremor that's very typical of someone who has Parkinson's, but she also had other things, including the inability to swallow. And that really perked my ears up, because that also happened to my dad. And when you have the inability to swallow, that's when you start starving to death. My dad died within 2 or 3 months after that happened. So he couldn't eat anymore. And so I realized this was a woman who had shown up on the doorstep of this retreat with a couple months to live, maybe. And it's not you can imagine, it's not a real pleasant way to go either, because you're literally just wasting away. So this was her last chance. And he used her case as an example to show what happens when you use his particular applied method for doing meditation. And he has this whole thing that he goes into that he describes in pretty deep detail. The net result for her was that she was able to eat after they were able to finish this workshop. And literally, she was able to eliminate all of her symptoms. And all I could think was, wow, I wish I had known that 15 years ago when my dad was still alive.
Yeah.
That one really hit home. So there's an example of somebody who is doing exactly what you asked for. He was feeding information to the audience. He was helping you understand the data. He was taking advantage of your curiosity to take you to the next step and the next step and the next step, and helping you piece all the pieces together of this amazing machine that we call our human body. And in the process, telling you a story that captivated you along the way, with the result of a healing that mainstream medicine says can't be done, which I think that happens an awful lot. But I'm not going to go down that path. I've done that enough. I'm okay. Mainstream medicine isn't there yet. Fine. Here's the ironic part, because I always like the ironic part. The data he was pulling from comes from mainstream medicine. Now, it also comes from alternative medicine, too. So he's drawing from both avenues.
Yeah.
But a lot of it was coming from mainstream medicine. And I thought to myself, how ironic, because there is somebody who recognizes that there's a lot of data there already that mainstream medicine has accumulated, and they really have. Over the decades, they have accumulated tons and tons of data, really useful data. But he's putting it to use in a way that they never even considered doing, because he refuses to buy into something that the rest of the mainstream buys into, the cult of the average. I think of, for instance, Sean Aker, one of the leading spokesmen of the positive psychology movement. In his book, The Happiness Advantage, he talks about how, in fact, this is also in a TED Talk that he gave, in which he says, they told me never to start your TED Talk with a graph. So I'm going to show you a graph here at the beginning of my TED Talk. And the first thing you should know about the graph is that it's all fake data. None of it's real. And he shows you this graph, and it's this beautiful, hyperbola type curve of dots, perfectly shaped curve with this one dot way up here, completely out of whack with it. He says, you can tell this is a fabulous curve. This is the kind of curve that people dream of doing when they're doing research. And the only thing that's wrong is that there's that one dot that's over there. But fortunately, because of the rules of statistics, I can remove that dot because it's messing up my data. And of course, he's turning it into a joke in what he's saying there, but he's also saying it to make a point, which is that curve represents the average.
Mhm.
The dot represents the extraordinary.
Mhm.
And he's not interested in the average. He's interested in the extraordinary because, as he said it, if I can figure out how that dot got up there, I can move the entire curve up to it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's why it's so important not to focus on the average.
Mhm. Well, and you start thinking about it, like if you broaden the conversation a little bit to all the things that we think are average, like
Mhm.
as a woman, oh, that's normal to
Mhm.
have like pain when you have that monthly cycle. And oh, it's normal that you're going to go through menopause at a certain age. And it's normal that as you age, you're going to hurt and your blood pressure is going to go up. These are all averages.
Right.
And we buy into them. So then like our brain is designed to just go find evidence of what we believe to be true. So it's constantly looking for, oh, my body is failing, oh, this is happening, yep, this is what's supposed to happen, this is what I've fed the computer program saying that at this age this is what's supposed to be happening in my life. And how detrimental is all of that?
Very. I don't even know we can measure how detrimental that is.
Yeah.
I
It's
think
like the nocebo, right? But in life.
it's exactly what that is. Yeah. In fact, Dispenza actually made a very interesting observation in the last episode that I saw. He identified and defined nocebo as being negative side effects, which is a very interesting thing, especially since there is so much in the pharmaceutical encyclopedia, if you will, of all those millions of drugs that the big pharma have been creating for the last 50 years or so many of which have such large numbers of side effects. One of the best jokes I ever saw was on a TV series where somebody was complaining that the doctor had prescribed seasickness pills for him, and one of the side effects was nausea. But it kind of describes just how wacky it's gotten with all the side effects that are associated with the pharmaceuticals. And it also raises the question, if nocebo is about negative side effects, and if you have so many side effects coming out of the pharmaceuticals, to what degree are we putting into people's minds the idea that they're going to get worse if they take modern medicine?
Yeah.
That nobody talks about that.
No.
They should be.
Yeah. Absolutely, they should be.
In fact, isn't one of the main tenets of medicine that you're supposed to do ethical medicine?
Well, I think so.
I mean,
Isn't
that's
that an oath or something?
The Hippocratic Oath, yeah. The Hippocratic Oath
Yeah.
is about doing things ethically.
Yeah.
And in fact, if you talk to most doctors, they'll tell you that modern medicine's cornerstone is to do things ethically. Kind of makes you wonder, though, what kind of ethic are they talking about?
Yeah.
Because there's an obvious one. I mean, the cornerstone of what actually gets done with treatment in modern medicine is pharmacy. Pills, medicines, that's what they do.
Yeah.
And there are so many side effects on them. Where's the ethics associated with that? Now, the answer you'll get will be something like, well, it's always a balancing. You have to balance the strengths, the pluses, and the minuses, and so forth. And I kind of get what they're saying there. I think it's fairly easy to see what they're saying. But isn't that a bit of a cop-out?
Yeah. I actually think of my mom in this scenario. So my mom has had mental health issues. She's had kidney issues. She has diabetes. She's got high blood pressure. She's taken a water pill. And, like at one point she was on 25, 30 pills a day.
Whoa.
For different things. Yeah. Like I have no idea. She's got a phone book thing and opens it up and knows what all the pills are and when she's supposed to take them. I have no idea how she keeps track of it. But anyway, she was seeing the head kidney doctor in the city that's closest to us. And he was like world renowned. He worked at the university. Like he is a surgeon and he's very good. And I met him. I don't, for whatever reason, through COVID and my like questioning of should you do that? Should you do this? Like, you know, whatever, right? I got involved in my mom's healthcare. And it was kind of by accident and by choice and by request. So, you know, my mom would be like, you need to come with me to these appointments and stuff. So I would go with her. So I met him. He's a really nice guy, you know, whatever, right? And thinking he's doing a really good job. And I'm sure that he was doing the best that he can. And so anyway, his caseload gets too big and he's like, you need to see a different kidney doctor. And she's like, yeah, okay, sounds good. So she wants me to come with her to her first appointment with her brand new doctor. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll come with you. It's at a different place, you know, whatever, I'll drive, I'll take you there. So we go there and we see his resident and they start talking about how they want her to go for another test like today because her kidney function went down. And like in the grand scheme of things, they have some sort of calculation that tells you in 2 years and in 5 years, the chance that you would actually need dialysis. And her 2-year number was 0.8% chance. And her 5-year number, I think, was 1% chance. So still very low.
Sure.
I mean, she's 75. So, I mean, pretty good for that. But they didn't really explain what was going on, but they were like, we want you to go get more tests, like go right now. And then we might take you off some pills. And the result of that test that they did, he called her the very next day and they took her off of, I can't remember if it was like 3 or 4 pills, but she was taking 10 of these 4 different varieties of pills throughout the day, 10 different pills.
Wow.
And like one was for her blood pressure and one was for her diabetes. And I can't remember what the other one was for, but they took her off those because they figured it was having a negative reaction with the kidney. And it's so interesting that now like the kidney, like this guy's got a different perspective, obviously, than the other doctor and like the GP and like everything else. He's specializing in kidneys, but he's like, you're killing your kidney by being on this. Like you need to learn to manage your diabetes with your food. You need to learn it to manage your high blood pressure. And I think she could have stayed off her blood pressure medication. She has a worrywart. So she was constantly worrying about everything and worry. And so and taking her blood pressure like every 10 minutes, you know, whatever, right? Me and my dad are like, do some Qigong, like relax. It's okay. And so they ended up putting her on a different pill, but like a quarter of the dose that she had before. And so it goes to like what you were talking about, like the negative impact on some things. Like they took her off 10 different pills that she was taking a day because it was having such a negative impact on her kidney. And it's fascinating.
Well, not only was it having a negative impact on her kidney, apparently it was also having a negative impact on her mental state. Because like you just described, you know, she's a worrywart, right? What they were doing is they were feeding her tendency to worry.
100%.
How can that possibly produce a good result? I can't see how that ends up being good.
Well, and you know, it's interesting because the other doctor who's the surgeon, the head guy, you know, whatever, right? Like I've been to a bunch of those meetings and we would just talk about this one number. I don't remember what it is, some sort of kidney function number. And so then this new doctor and his residents are talking about how that number is just a point on a graph. Over time with lots of data, it matters, but the one individual on its own alone really doesn't have a big impact.
Okay.
And then that was the first time that she had heard about this calculation that figures out, like, takes all this different data that you've given them, including this whatever test for the kidney, but a bunch of other things, and then plots it into a calculation to figure out how likely you would be for dialysis. Like literally my mom is sitting there and the resident, it was a girl, she was like, Yeah, so you have like a 0.8% or 0.7, I can't remember what it is, chance of 2 years needing dialysis, or a 1% chance of needing it in 5 years. And my mom, like, I could tell she wasn't getting it because she'd never heard this calculation before. And I'm like, Mom, you literally have this, like, I'm pretty sure of the statistics here, but you don't quote me on it, but you have the same chance of dying in a car accident as you do of needing dialysis in the next 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And she like just burst into tears and looked at the doctor and was like, are you sure?
Yeah.
You know, because the other doctor was just telling her that her kidney function, that number was going down. So she was so worked up about it. And like, I can only imagine the negative impact on all of the other things because of that worry.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
I even have a question about that. I'm sure they have some justification why those tests are so important to identify whether or not you're going to likely to need dialysis in 2 years or 5 years. But I'm trying to imagine what those might be. Because as far as I can tell, both of those measurements are about focusing your attention on something bad that might happen. And we want to find out what's the likelihood of this bad thing happening.
You could even spin it like you have a 99% chance of not needing kidney dialysis in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Like, wow. Like my mom was so out of it at that point, like hearing that number, I was like, Mom, are you worried about driving home today? Like that we're going to die in a car accident? She's like, no, of course not. Why would I worry about that? That's ridiculous. Like that's like never going to happen. I was like, yeah, we have the same amount of chance pretty much of dying in a car accident on the way home as you do in needing dialysis in the next 5 years. Like if you're not worried about the one, why are you worried about the other? Like let it go.
And yet that's exactly what happens. That's why the nocebo effect is so effective. It's effective because it keeps reinforcing. Like this is the way what we know about how the nervous system works. It keeps reinforcing on the nervous system the same fear, the same thought pattern, the same belief over and over and over again, so that even when the evidence comes along to counter it, we still defend what the nervous system has been learning all this time.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't until we're willing to actually shift the way we think about it that the nervous system actually literally rewires itself to adapt itself to the new thought pattern.
Mm-hmm.
But that requires taking the responsibility for what information you're taking in. It doesn't help when the medical community is feeding you information that is contrary to that interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they're not going to acknowledge it. And that's, a big thing about that fertility journey, my fertility journey, is that they're never going to acknowledge that the feelings that I have of like, I believe that nothing is wrong, that maybe there was an imbalance in hormones. Maybe I could see that, but there's nothing wrong that can't be like corrected by the body. Maybe some external things like holistic medicine or whatever. I truly believe that. And I truly believe that I have an awareness of what's going on in my body, but they won't acknowledge that either. They can't, or they don't want to. I don't know. They definitely don't want to.
I think can't is probably fairly close, because the can't part refers to the worship of the average.
Mm-hmm.
It's the reason why placebo gets excluded from double-blind placebo-controlled studies, or even triple-blind placebo-controlled studies. It's the belief that you have to take placebo out of the equation in order to find out whether the substance itself has a beneficial effect.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand why you'd want to know that. The part that I still don't understand, and I don't think it's a good justification for it, I've never heard of a good justification, is why once you've identified that factor, once you've identified to what degree the substance by itself is efficacious, why you cannot then therefore reintroduce placebo into the protocol. There's no reason that I can think of to keep placebo out. And there's every reason to keep nocebo out. But medicine does exactly the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
Medicine keeps placebo out because that's the way they did the testing. And they introduce nocebo by being honest about the side effects.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder about medical ethics. I think medical ethics, as they're structured today, are that hot mess we were talking about.
Yep.
Well, that kind of points to me, the ultimate conclusion there is this is another reason why we all need to take responsibility for our own health. We got to stop relying on doctors to be responsible for our health, because quite clearly doctors aren't appropriate for that. They're not the right ones for it. You know?
Well, I think we can even broaden that statement to responsible for all things in our life. The more that we get to know ourselves, the more that we're listening to the universe, to God, to our higher selves, that innate voice within that is guiding us, the more we tap into that and believe in the possibilities that surround us, that are available to us, the more available they become and the more extraordinary your life can become. Stop letting everybody else tell you how it has to be. You get to choose.
Yeah, I like that. That's how you take control of your own life.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I think ultimately is where medicine will go to in the long run. They have a lot of resistance points, but I don't think it can really not go that direction.
Yeah.
What's going to drive it is the degree to which people decide to take responsibility for themselves rather than relying on the doctors. So
yeah. Necessity.
Well, as usual, we came up with a really cool conversation, despite the fact that our guest wasn't able to make it. Although I think I kind of see her poking her eyes in here with a couple minutes to go. So we'll have to figure something out for another time with her, because we're out of time on this particular episode of the show. But once again, I want to thank you for, first of all, what you did yesterday when you dropped in with my crew and helped to give them some training on how you deal with a client one-on-one, which was valuable information. I made the comment to the crew after Jody Lim gave her presentation that they got the equivalent of a postgraduate course in 28 minutes, which was true. I mean, there was so much stuff in there. I'm not sure they even absorbed it all.
Thank you.
But that was really, really great. So thank you for that. And thank you for all the great information you shared today and the stories. I love the stories that we were telling. I mean, they weren't all happy stories, but boy, they were educational. And they led to some really good information for all of us, I think.
Me too.
All right. So thank you very much. Thank you, podcast listeners everywhere. We will see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.